There is a peculiar loneliness that very few people ever speak about. It is not the loneliness of having no friends, nor is it the loneliness of living in isolation. It is the loneliness of seeing what others refuse to see. If you have ever walked into a room and immediately sensed tension before anyone spoke, if you have ever looked into someone's smile and somehow knew they were hiding pain, if you have ever noticed contradictions that everyone else ignored, then what I am about to tell you may explain your life better than anything you have heard before. Most people believe perception is simply the ability to observe the world. But throughout my years studying the human psyche, I came to understand that perception exists on many different levels. Some people see appearances, others see motives. A very small number see the unconscious itself. And this gift, despite what many imagine, is rarely experienced as a blessing. It is often the beginning of profound suffering, because the deeper your perception becomes, the more difficult ordinary life appears. You stop believing simple explanations. You begin recognizing patterns hidden beneath behavior. You notice emotions that people desperately try to conceal. You hear truth inside silence. And eventually, you realize that the world survives not because people understand themselves, but because they spend their lives avoiding themselves. This realization changes everything. Not because the world suddenly becomes darker, but because illusion begins disappearing. And illusion, despite all its flaws, protects many people from confronting who they really are. The individual who sees beyond illusion therefore becomes dangerous. Not dangerous because they seek conflict. Dangerous because their presence quietly threatens every mask around them. Human beings possess an extraordinary ability to deceive themselves. This is not always malicious. In many cases, it is psychological survival. The ego constructs stories. It creates identities. It manufactures certainty. Without these protective structures, many personalities would collapse beneath the weight of their own contradictions. That is why people cling so fiercely to the images they have created. The successful businessman who secretly fears failure. The devoted parent who quietly resents the sacrifices they made. The confident leader haunted by feelings of inadequacy, the cheerful friend silently drowning in despair, the spiritual teacher consumed by pride. Each personality develops a mask. I called this mask the persona. The persona is necessary. Without it, society could hardly function. Yet the problem begins when people mistake the mask for the self. When this happens, the unconscious begins speaking through symptoms. Anxiety, depression, unexpected anger, jealousy, obsessions, dreams. The unconscious never stops communicating. It simply changes its language. Most people never learn this language. Instead, they suppress every uncomfortable feeling. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They seek entertainment. Anything to avoid sitting alone with their own mind. Because silence has an unsettling quality. Silence removes distraction. And when distraction disappears, the unconscious begins speaking. Many fear silence not because silence is empty, but because silence is full of forgotten memories, unresolved grief, hidden desires, rejected emotions, forgotten dreams. The unconscious patiently waits for the moment when consciousness finally becomes quiet enough to listen. Few ever allow that moment to arrive, yet there are individuals for whom listening is not optional. Their perception is naturally directed inward. Without trying, they detect inconsistencies. Without effort, they notice emotional currents invisible to others. Without explanation, they feel disturbances beneath ordinary conversation. At first, they assume everyone experiences life this way. Only later do they realize something unsettling. Most people do not truly observe. They merely recognize familiar patterns. There is a profound difference. Observation requires presence. Recognition requires memory. Most people are not seeing reality. They are comparing reality to expectations. This explains why two individuals can witness the same event, yet leave with completely different understandings. One observed, the other merely confirmed existing beliefs. The unconscious loves certainty, because certainty prevents growth. Growth demands uncertainty. Transformation requires confusion. Every major psychological breakthrough begins with the destruction of an illusion, and illusion rarely disappears peacefully. Imagine standing before an ancient house. From the outside, it appears magnificent. Strong walls, beautiful windows, elegant architecture. But once you enter, you discover termites have consumed the foundation. Would the house become unsafe the moment you notice the damage? No, it was already unsafe. Your perception merely revealed what already existed. This is the burden carried by those who see deeply. They do not create uncomfortable truths, they uncover them. Yet human beings often confuse the messenger with the message. The individual who notices dysfunction becomes labeled negative. The person who identifies manipulation becomes called suspicious. The one who predicts inevitable conflict is accused of creating it. Not because they are wrong, because reality threatens comfort. Comfort has always been humanity's favorite illusion. Truth demands responsibility. Illusion requires only agreement. Observe any family. Every family possesses unspoken rules, topics that cannot be discussed, emotions that cannot be expressed, memories everyone pretends never happened. These silent agreements create temporary stability, but stability purchased through denial eventually demands repayment. The unconscious collects every ignored emotion, every suppressed truth, every hidden resentment. Nothing disappears, everything accumulates. Eventually, the burden becomes unbearable. Then people ask, why did everything suddenly fall apart? It never happened suddenly. Only perception arrived suddenly. The collapse began years earlier. You simply witnessed the final consequence. This principle extends beyond families. It governs friendships, relationships, organizations, entire civilizations. History repeatedly demonstrates one painful lesson. Cultures rarely collapse because they face reality. They collapse because they refuse to. The individual who sees early warning signs therefore occupies a tragic position. They understand what others cannot yet accept. And acceptance cannot be forced. One of the greatest mistakes highly perceptive individuals make is believing truth alone changes people. It does not. If truth were enough, every book would transform lives, every lecture would create wisdom, every warning would prevent disaster. Yet experience teaches otherwise. People change only when their unconscious becomes ready, not one moment sooner. This understanding transformed my approach completely. I stopped asking, how do I convince people? Instead, I asked, what psychological condition prevents them from seeing? That question revealed something extraordinary. Every resistance hides a fear, every denial protects a wound, every arrogance conceals insecurity, every hatred masks suffering. The unconscious always compensates. When someone appears excessively confident, search for fear. When someone constantly seeks admiration, search for emptiness. When someone cannot tolerate criticism, search for fragility. Human behavior is symbolic. Nothing appears without purpose. The conscious mind speaks through words. The unconscious speaks through patterns. And those who learn to recognize these patterns begin living in an entirely different world. Not because reality changed, but because their eyes finally opened. If you continue to sharpen your perception, you will eventually encounter a disturbing truth. People rarely reject you because of who you are. More often, they reject what they unconsciously experience in your presence. This distinction is one of the most important discoveries I ever made while studying the human psyche. You believe someone dislikes you. You assume you have offended them. You search through your words, wondering what mistake you made. But frequently, the conflict has very little to do with anything you consciously said. The unconscious speaks before language ever begins. Long before two people exchange opinions, their unconscious minds have already begun communicating. This communication happens through posture, expression, silence, emotion, and countless signals that never enter conscious awareness. Most people cannot recognize these exchanges, they simply feel them, then they invent explanations afterward. The conscious mind always arrives late. It creates logical stories to justify emotional reactions that began long before reason entered the conversation. This is why someone can dislike you within seconds, not because they truly know you, but because something inside you has awakened something inside them. This phenomenon fascinated me for decades. Eventually, I understood that the human mind possesses an extraordinary defense mechanism: projection. Projection occurs whenever an individual refuses to acknowledge something within themselves. The rejected quality does not disappear. It cannot. Instead, it is unconsciously transferred onto someone else. Imagine carrying a heavy object for years. Eventually, your arms become exhausted. You desperately want relief. The psyche behaves similarly. Rather than carrying painful truths consciously, it places them upon another person. The individual becomes convinced. The problem exists out there, never inside. This explains why people often accuse others of precisely the qualities they secretly possess. The dishonest person becomes obsessed with detecting dishonesty. The manipulator constantly fears manipulation. The jealous partner suspects betrayal everywhere. The arrogant individual sees arrogance in everyone else. Projection allows the ego to remain innocent, and innocence is extraordinarily addictive. Few people willingly surrender it. The danger for highly perceptive individuals is that they unknowingly become screens upon which others project their unconscious contents. Without speaking, without intending, simply by existing. You become a mirror, and mirrors are rarely loved. Think carefully about this. If someone stood before a mirror that revealed not only their appearance, but also every hidden fear, every suppressed resentment, every selfish impulse, every secret regret, would they admire the mirror, or would they desperately try to destroy it? Most choose destruction. Not because they hate truth, because they fear transformation. Transformation requires death. Not physical death, psychological death. The death of the false identity. The ego experiences this as catastrophe. The self experiences it as liberation. These are not the same. The ego asks, how do I protect who I already believe I am? The self asks, who am I beneath everything I believe? These questions lead in opposite directions. One preserves illusion, the other dissolves it. Throughout history, every meaningful transformation has demanded the collapse of certainty. The caterpillar cannot become the butterfly while remaining attached to its previous form. Likewise, a human being cannot become psychologically whole while defending every illusion the ego has constructed. Wholeness requires surrender, but surrender terrifies the unconscious mind, because the unconscious mistakes familiarity for safety. Even suffering becomes comforting if it is familiar enough. Observe people trapped in destructive relationships. They complain constantly, they recognize the pain, yet they remain. Why? Because uncertainty feels more frightening than suffering they already understand. This is one of the greatest paradoxes of human psychology. People do not merely fear pain, they fear the unknown, and the unknown is precisely where growth waits. Highly perceptive individuals often become impatient with this process. They see solutions clearly. They recognize obvious patterns. They wonder, why can't they simply see what is happening? The answer is both simple and tragic, because perception does not occur through intelligence alone. It occurs through readiness. You cannot force another soul to awaken. No amount of explanation can accomplish what only inner necessity can produce. Many years ago, I abandoned the fantasy that wisdom could simply be handed from one mind to another. Wisdom cannot be transferred. It must emerge, like a seed breaking through the earth after a long winter. You may water it, protect it, encourage it, but you cannot pull it upward. If you do, you destroy it. The same principle governs psychological development. Every individual possesses an inner timetable. Some awaken early, others awaken through tragedy. Some never awaken at all. This realization should not fill you with despair. It should fill you with compassion. Because every unconscious person is fighting battles they themselves cannot see. Remember this whenever someone behaves irrationally. The unconscious always seeks balance. If a person has buried fear, they may become excessively controlling. If they have buried grief, they may appear emotionally cold. If they have buried weakness, they may obsess over power. The psyche compensates, always. Nothing within us remains inactive forever. Suppressed emotions simply choose different pathways. They emerge through illness, conflict, dreams, addiction, compulsive ambition, perfectionism, anxiety. The unconscious refuses to remain silent indefinitely. It waits patiently, then speaks with increasing intensity. First it whispers, then it knocks. Eventually, it breaks down the door. Many people call this crisis. I call it opportunity. For only when the old identity begins collapsing does genuine transformation become possible. Unfortunately, most people misunderstand suffering completely. They ask, why is this happening to me? A more useful question would be, what within me is attempting to be born? Pain is often misunderstood as punishment. Yet psychologically, pain frequently announces expansion. The old structure no longer fits. The personality has outgrown its previous limitations. But growth demands sacrifice. Something familiar must die. This is why individuation, the journey toward becoming your authentic self, is never comfortable. It requires abandoning identities that once protected you, roles that once defined you, beliefs inherited from family, expectations imposed by society, approval that once felt essential. Every attachment asks the same question. Who are you without me? Few dare answer honestly, because the answer changes everything. The danger of seeing what others do not is not merely social rejection, it is that eventually you begin seeing yourself with equal clarity. And that is a far more frightening experience. For there comes a moment when your own unconscious stands before you. No distractions, no excuses, no audience, only you. And the parts of yourself you spent years avoiding. Your envy, your fear, your pride, your need for validation, your hidden desire for control, your capacity for cruelty. Most imagine enlightenment means discovering inner light. But they forget something essential. Before you encounter the light, you meet the shadow, and the shadow never arrives politely. It arrives carrying every truth the ego refused to hear. Many turn away, some become bitter, a few continue walking. Those few begin the true journey. Because the purpose of perception was never to judge the darkness in others. It was to illuminate the darkness within yourself. Only then does perception transform from burden into wisdom. Only then does seeing cease to isolate you and begin to free you. There is a moment in every human life that determines the direction of the soul. It is not the day you achieve success, nor the day you fall in love, nor even the day you experience failure. It is the day you encounter your own shadow. Most people imagine the shadow to be something evil, a dark force lurking beneath consciousness. This is only partially true. The shadow is not evil. It is everything you refuse to become aware of. It contains your anger, but also your courage, your selfishness, but also your hidden potential, your jealousy, but also your deepest desires. The tragedy is that most people spend their entire lives trying to appear good. In doing so, they unknowingly abandon half of themselves. Every quality rejected by consciousness descends into the unconscious. Nothing disappears, nothing is erased, it merely waits. Waiting has extraordinary patience. The unconscious does not hurry. Years may pass, decades even, yet eventually the rejected parts demand recognition. Some arrive through dreams, others through relationships. Many arrive disguised as enemies. This is why the people who provoke you most deserve your attention. They are rarely random. The individual who awakens intense emotion inside you has often touched something unfinished within your own psyche. Ask yourself this: why do two people witness the same individual, yet react completely differently? One admires them, another despises them, a third feels indifferent. The person has not changed. Only the observers of each responds according to their own unconscious. Material reality acts as a mirror. Not everyone sees the same reflection. This realization transformed my understanding of conflict. I no longer asked, "Who is right?" Instead, I asked, "What unconscious force is seeking expression?" Conflict rarely begins where people believe it does. Arguments about money often hide fear. Arguments about respect often hide insecurity. Arguments about loyalty often hide abandonment wounds. Surface problems are seldom the true problem. The unconscious always speaks symbolically. Learning this language changes everything. Imagine standing beside a lake. The surface appears calm, yet beneath the water, entire ecosystems remain invisible. Fish move silently, currents flow unnoticed, ancient trees rest beneath the depths. Human consciousness resembles that lake. Most conversations occur only upon the surface. Polite words, pleasant smiles, predictable opinions. But beneath those exchanges, entire psychological worlds remain hidden. A single sentence may awaken childhood memories. A simple glance may trigger decades of insecurity. One unexpected silence may revive forgotten rejection. The conscious mind notices none of this, yet the unconscious reacts immediately. This is why perception becomes such a heavy responsibility. Once you begin recognizing these hidden movements, you can never completely ignore them again. Many people believe awareness automatically produces happiness. I discovered the opposite. Awareness first produces burden, because ignorance permits simplicity. Knowledge demands responsibility. Once you recognize unconscious suffering, you can no longer pretend it does not exist. You begin noticing the exhausted cashier forcing a smile, the elderly man eating alone every afternoon, the child whose laughter disappears the moment their parents begin arguing, the executive whose confidence collapses whenever approval is absent. Everywhere you look, you encounter invisible battles. This realization can overwhelm the unprepared mind. Many highly perceptive individuals make a dangerous mistake. They attempt to carry everyone else's pain. Compassion slowly becomes identification. Concern becomes emotional absorption. Empathy becomes exhaustion. Eventually, they forget where another person's suffering ends, and their own begins. This confusion destroys countless sensitive souls. Understand something clearly. To witness suffering does not require becoming suffering. There is profound wisdom in maintaining psychological boundaries. A physician cannot heal every patient by becoming ill himself. Likewise, you cannot illuminate another person's darkness by extinguishing your own light. Your responsibility is consciousness, not rescue. The unconscious constantly tempts us toward unnecessary sacrifice. It whispers, "If you truly cared, you would carry this burden for them." Yet this is not love, it is unconscious identification. True love strengthens another person's capacity to face reality. It does not imprison both souls inside the same wound. Many relationships fail because two unconscious people attempt to heal one another while neither has learned to heal themselves. Each expects the other to complete what only inner work can accomplish. Soon disappointment replaces affection, resentment replaces admiration, dependence replaces intimacy. Then they wonder where love disappeared. Love did not disappear. Illusion did. The greatest gift you can offer another human being is not perfection, it is presence. Presence without judgment, presence without manipulation, presence without needing them to become someone else. Such presence is extraordinarily rare, because most interactions contain hidden demands. Approve me. Validate me. Agree with me. Need me. The ego negotiates constantly. The self simply witnesses. When you become deeply conscious, you discover that silence often communicates more than speech. There are moments when another person does not require advice. They require space, space to discover their own truth. Psychological growth cannot be borrowed. It must be lived. One of the greatest errors of modern life is believing information creates transformation. Information fills the mind. Experience transforms the soul. You may read 1,000 books about courage, yet remain afraid. You may memorize every theory about love, yet never truly open your heart. Knowledge becomes wisdom only after experience reshapes the personality. This is why suffering, despite all its cruelty, often becomes life's greatest teacher. Not because pain itself is noble, but because pain destroys illusions that comfort could never touch. Every meaningful transformation requires surrendering an identity that no longer serves you. There comes a day when the obedient child must die, so the authentic adult can be born. The fearful seeker must disappear, so the courageous creator may emerge. The mask must fall before the face beneath it can finally breathe. Many resist this process not because they lack intelligence, because they fear emptiness. Who am I without my achievements? Who am I without approval? Who am I without the identity I spent years building? These questions terrify the ego, yet they liberate the soul. Your authentic self cannot emerge while false identities continue occupying its place. Think of a sculptor standing before a massive block of marble. The masterpiece already exists within the stone. The sculptor does not create it. He removes everything that does not belong. Psychological development follows the same principle. You are not becoming someone new, you are removing everything that was never truly you. Every false belief, every inherited fear, every borrowed identity, every unconscious role, piece by piece, the authentic self begins to appear. This process feels like loss, but only because the ego mistakes subtraction for destruction. In reality, it is revelation. The more clearly you see, the less interested you become in appearances. Status loses its fascination. Recognition becomes unnecessary. Comparison begins to fade. You stop asking, "How do I impress the world?" and begin asking, "How do I become real?" That single question separates those who merely survive from those who truly awaken, because authenticity possesses a quiet power no performance can imitate. It requires no audience, no applause, no permission, only courage. And courage always begins in the shadow. There comes a stage in the journey of consciousness that almost everyone misunderstands. It arrives quietly, without announcement, without celebration, without anyone preparing you for its weight. It is the stage where your perception begins separating you from the world you once called home. At first, you believe something is wrong with you. You notice conversations that no longer satisfy you. People speak for hours, yet say almost nothing. You begin sensing how often words are used to avoid truth rather than reveal it. Someone asks another person how they are. "I'm fine." Everyone nods. The conversation continues, yet something inside you whispers, "They are not fine. They have not been fine for a long time." You notice the hesitation before they answered, the fatigue hidden beneath their smile, the sadness concealed inside their laughter. And suddenly, ordinary conversation feels strangely incomplete, not because others lack intelligence, but because most communication occurs between personas, masks speaking to masks, roles interacting with roles. Very rarely do two authentic selves truly meet. When they do, time disappears, silence becomes comfortable. No performance is required, nothing needs to be exaggerated, nothing needs to be hidden. Such encounters are among the rarest experiences in human life. Many people spend decades without experiencing one. This is why those who see deeply often feel lonely in crowded places. Loneliness is not always the absence of people. Sometimes it is the absence of authenticity. You may sit beside dozens of individuals, yet feel completely unseen. Because no one is speaking to who you truly are. They are responding only to the version of you they imagine. Every person carries an image of you inside their own mind. Remarkably, none of those images are actually you. One sees you as confident, another sees you as distant. One believes you are kind, another believes you are arrogant. Someone admires your silence, someone else interprets the same silence as rejection. Which version is true? Perhaps none. Perhaps all. Because people never experience you directly, they experience themselves in relation to you. The unconscious constantly colors perception. This is why reputation is such an unstable foundation upon which to build identity. If you define yourself according to the opinions of others, you surrender your life to countless unconscious projections. Today they praise you. Tomorrow they criticize you. Nothing essential has changed, only their perception. The authentic self cannot be built upon shifting reflections. It must arise from within. This realization often begins the period I describe as sacred isolation. Notice carefully. I did not say loneliness. I said isolation. There is a profound difference. Loneliness says, I have no one. Sacred isolation says, I am finally learning who I am. For many people, this stage feels frightening. The familiar friendships begin changing, conversations lose depth. Places that once felt exciting now seem strangely empty. Entertainment loses its ability to distract. You begin spending more time alone. Society often interprets this as withdrawal. Yet psychologically, something entirely different may be occurring. Your psyche is reorganizing itself. The unconscious has recognized that your previous identity can no longer contain your growing awareness. Like a snake shedding old skin, you cannot continue wearing psychological structures that have become too small. Yet during this transition, you possess neither the old identity nor the new one. You exist between worlds. Many abandon the journey here. The uncertainty feels unbearable. They rush back toward familiarity, even if familiarity means unconscious living. Because certainty comforts the ego. Growth rarely does. The caterpillar probably believes its world is ending. It has no understanding of butterflies. Likewise, the unconscious personality fears every transformation because it cannot imagine what exists beyond its current limitations. This explains why fear often appears immediately before profound growth. Not because danger has increased, because possibility has. The ego confuses expansion with annihilation. Whenever your life begins changing deeply, observe what fear tells you. It almost always whispers the same sentence. Go back. Go back to who you used to be. Go back to old habits. Go back to familiar suffering. Go back to the life you already know. Yet consciousness quietly replies, there is nothing left there. You have already seen too much. The illusion has dissolved. You cannot unknow what you now understand. One of the most painful experiences during individuation is realizing that some relationships survive only while you remain unconscious. As soon as you begin changing, the relationship becomes uncomfortable. Why? Because unconscious systems seek balance. If one person grows, the entire system must reorganize. Some people celebrate your growth, others resist it. Not because they dislike you, but because your transformation silently invites them to transform as well. And invitations to grow often feel like accusations to those who are not ready. Without saying a single word, your authenticity begins exposing everyone else's compromises, not intentionally, simply naturally. This is why highly conscious individuals are often misunderstood. Their existence raises uncomfortable questions. Why am I pretending? Why do I keep betraying myself? Why have I ignored my own dreams? Many prefer avoiding such questions altogether, so instead, they criticize the one who inspired them. The unconscious has countless strategies for protecting itself: ridicule, dismissal, jealousy, mockery, indifference. These are rarely signs that you are wrong. More often, they reveal that your existence has disturbed another person's unconscious equilibrium. Do not misunderstand me. This does not mean believing yourself superior. That would merely create another illusion. The moment perception becomes pride, wisdom disappears. True awareness produces humility. Because the deeper you understand yourself, the more clearly you recognize how much remains unconscious. Every genuine insight reveals 10 new mysteries. Arrogance belongs to shallow knowledge. Humility belongs to deep understanding. I have observed that those who truly know themselves rarely feel compelled to prove themselves. They no longer seek constant agreement, nor do they waste energy convincing everyone else. Truth possesses remarkable patience. It does not require immediate recognition. It simply continues existing, whether accepted or denied. A tree does not argue with those who refuse to see the forest. The sun does not demand applause each morning. Likewise, the individuated person gradually stops seeking validation from unconscious crowds, not because they no longer care about humanity, but because they finally understand something essential. Approval is temporary, authenticity is permanent. This realization changes your relationship with rejection. You stop asking, "Why don't they understand me?" and begin asking, "Am I understanding myself?" The second question leads toward freedom. The first often leads toward resentment. Remember this carefully. The purpose of seeing more than others is not to stand above them. It is to stand more honestly within yourself. Only then does perception become wisdom. Only then does solitude become strength. Only then does silence begin speaking with a voice louder than words. For it is in silence, far away from applause, far away from judgment, far away from the endless noise of unconscious expectation, that the authentic self finally begins to reveal its face. And once you have seen that face, no illusion can ever completely satisfy you again. If you have remained with me until this moment, then perhaps you already understand something that many people spend an entire lifetime trying to escape. The greatest danger was never your ability to see what others cannot. The greatest danger was believing that your perception was a curse. For years, perhaps even decades, you questioned yourself. You wondered why certain places exhausted you, why some conversations felt unbearably shallow, why you sensed dishonesty before evidence appeared, why crowds drained you while solitude restored you. You searched for an explanation. Sometimes you blamed yourself. Sometimes you wished you could simply stop seeing so much. But consciousness does not evolve by moving backward. Once the eyes of the psyche have opened, they never truly close again. The only question that remains is this: will your perception become your prison or your liberation? Everything we have explored leads toward this single choice. You can spend your life trying to convince unconscious people to awaken, or you can become living proof of what awakening looks like. There is an enormous difference. The first path leads to exhaustion. The second leads to peace. Never forget this. People rarely transform because someone defeated them in an argument. They transform because they encountered someone whose way of living revealed another possibility. That possibility becomes a seed. Sometimes it grows immediately, sometimes years later, sometimes only after suffering has prepared the soil, but the seed remains. Your responsibility has never been to force growth. Your responsibility has always been to embody it. Become the kind of person whose presence creates calm, whose silence speaks louder than unnecessary words, whose honesty gives others permission to become honest, whose courage reminds fearful people that another life is possible. This is how consciousness evolves, not through domination, but through example. The world desperately needs individuals who can see clearly without becoming cynical, who understand darkness without becoming consumed by it, who recognize deception without losing compassion, who carry wisdom without developing arrogance. This is the true work of individuation. Not becoming perfect, becoming whole. Wholeness does not mean eliminating your darkness. It means making peace with it. The strongest tree is not the one untouched by storms. It is the one whose roots learn to grow deeper because of them. Your wounds can become wisdom. Your solitude can become strength. Your sensitivity can become vision. Your fear can become courage. But only if you stop fighting the very qualities that make you who you are. The world will always reward conformity, at least in the beginning. It applauds those who repeat familiar ideas. It celebrates those who never disturb comfortable illusions. But history remembers something entirely different. It remembers the individuals who dared to become themselves, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Do not misunderstand your loneliness. It may not be punishment, it may be preparation. Preparation for becoming someone whose life no longer depends upon external approval. Preparation for becoming someone who can stand alone without becoming bitter. Preparation for becoming someone who remains compassionate in a world that often chooses unconsciousness over truth. There will still be moments of doubt. There will still be nights when you question your path. There will still be days when misunderstanding hurts. That is part of being human. Even the deepest awareness does not remove pain. It simply gives pain meaning. And meaning transforms suffering. When suffering loses meaning, it destroys us. When suffering discovers meaning, it changes us. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson the unconscious has been trying to teach all along. Life was never asking you to become someone else. It was asking you to remove everything that prevented you from becoming yourself. Every fear, every mask, every borrowed belief, every unconscious role, one by one, until nothing remained except what was always real. The authentic self. That quiet center within you which neither praise nor criticism can touch. The place where your deepest intuition lives. The place where truth no longer feels frightening. The place where you finally stop asking, "Who do they want me to be?" and begin asking, "Who was I before the world told me who I should become?" That question has the power to transform an entire life. If you are one of those rare individuals who sees beneath appearances, do not apologize for your perception. Refine it, discipline it, ground it in humility. Allow it to become a source of understanding rather than judgment. Because seeing clearly is not the destination. Living wisely is. Remember, the world does not need more people who merely collect knowledge. It needs individuals who embody wisdom, who can walk into confusion without becoming confused, who can witness fear without becoming fearful, who can face the shadow without forgetting the light. That is the calling of a conscious human being. The danger of seeing what others don't was never that you would know too much. It was that you might spend your entire life doubting what your soul already knew. Trust the quiet voice within. Continue your inner work. Honor your solitude, face your shadow with courage, and never forget. Every great transformation in history began with one individual willing to see what everyone else ignored. Perhaps that individual is now becoming you. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Until our next exploration of the human psyche, remember this one final truth. The world changes only after one person has the courage to see clearly, and then chooses to live according to that vision. Thank you for listening.